the meeting and say welcome to everybody. It's so nice to see virtually everybody here and only one virtual. Hi, Julie. And so call the meeting to order. I know everybody's in a really good mood, and I'm not on the academic calendar, but most of you are. And it's not totally a jailbreak, but it's, it's coming up. With great anticipation, we look forward to concluding the year. And it's, in my view, it's been a wonderful, wonderful year. And before I get into like any type of report, I'd like to have somebody who has reviewed the minutes make a motion to adopt them. If there are any corrections, additions, deletions, anybody? Motion?
So move the motion.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Now it says next on mine is interim chair's report. I don't have much to report other than everything was like wonderful for the inauguration. Shout out to Shelley and Erica. Hello. And of course our president. It was a really fantastic time. I think really, not only was it a lot of fun, and you are two party gals. So this isn't recorded, right? Okay, so it was a really showed the university in its best light, and everybody who participated. And it was an honor to be a part of it. And it was just a wonderful time. And you were so eloquent and appropriate. And it just, just cranked the level up and put everybody at ease at one hand, and the other really inspired. So it was very, very inspirational. And I think that was the real purpose of it. And it was unbelievably successful. It hit every mark, ding, 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 ding. And, our planners, are to be applauded. I really mean it. I really mean it. So thank you. Now, this is kind of the last meeting for Barb. We're going to say it's bittersweet, but it was a one year interim, right? So it wasn't double, it was quadruple, right? Wonderful. And you were such a great steward of everything, and people not only liked you but respected you. And therefore, we all benefited from it. And sorry to see you go, but I'm not a changed person. I like, same thing for breakfast the last 50 years. So I'm like, but there is change, and you leave large shoes to fill, but the university in a great place. So thank you very much. Let's see, graduation's coming up. So we're all going to be praying for, wet, really nice weather. I've been through a few, downpours in my day. They're not that much fun. So, it's to be enjoyed. It's a great time. I was saying to Shelley how first time I went to one, I couldn't get off the thruway. Totally cray. And then they broke it up. And it's just an opportunity, Brianna, to see, and you're going to enjoy it. And everybody who comes enjoys it because there's just so many happy faces. And graduating students, the families, it's just a wonderful occasion. So it's all good. And one of my friends, Kevin Bryant's going to be speaking. So I look forward to that. Somebody I've mentored, a good friend of mine. And it'll be fun. So, welcome. Hopefully everybody will be there, smiling faces. With that, I'm going to ask President
Sure.
give us some remarks.
Thank you, Eli. And can you hear me on the screen? Yep. Great. You may introduce.
Okay. We have an introduction of Stella Turk, who I don't know, Stella, but you're the enrollment man. I know met you, but I didn't know you were like the heck, going up. I thought you would just show up for the party.
Oh my goodness. That too.
Okay, but I didn't know you were a real star with enrollment management. So thank you for being here. I know it's an interim position, and I'm sure you're having fun, and it's challenging. I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask how things are right now. But how are things going with enrollment management?
In the whole division already.
The whole division, bringing them in. How's next year look?
So next year, we're tracking about what we were
last year. We'd like to be a little bit higher in terms of our enrollment numbers. But we're not terribly shy of our goal. I think we still have a lot of challenges that we're thinking about also. But overall, our transfer numbers are going up. EOP is looking pretty good at this point. Our first year students, we're a couple hundred shy of our target, but we're still accepting. We're making phone calls, doing out. So I think it's promising, but we're still being realistic about stuff and thinking about retention because it's really the next step for students. Like advising, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've been a long time when retention was like, whoa, and it's just building and building and building. And that's fantastic. And so thank you for your efforts. I know you're having fun. You like to be challenged, and we're the beneficiaries, all of us, for it. And so thank you and welcome. You weren't on my agenda, but you scratched it now.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, that President, really?
All right, wonderful. So I'm going to stay on the theme of transitions. And just to highlight, of course, we just celebrated Barbara Lyman's movement from interim to finally retired after 4 years. And we'll have coming on board Dr. Bill McClure. Dr. McClure joins as provost beginning on July the 6th. And he's presently at Queens College, part of CUNY, and he's been there for several years. So us bringing Bill on board, we have somebody who understands the public school, university higher ed environment in New York. So the learning curve is not as steep because bringing in people who have no familiarity it can often be a shock to the system, especially if you come from out of state. So we're looking forward to Bill joining us. He's a scholar in terms of Japanese Asian studies and has done a lot of administrative work within the CUNY system. So we're very fortunate and look forward to having him on board. You were just reminded, and you were just speaking to Stella about her role. I'm not sure if Jess had left when we last met or she was in the process of leaving. And Jess Ben Dickinson was the interim VP for enrollment management. And when she departed because of some life choices for family, she was commuting more than an hour and 45 minutes each way. And she had a child that she needed. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Mm-hmm. She really hated to leave, but she had to make a family-based decision. And so Stella has been with SUNY New Paltz for a number of years and was really clearly able to step in and fill the void. So Stella agreed to serve as interim for the year. As a new president, having that stability for a year allows me the breathing room that I need to think about what is the right configuration, how should we pursue a search. And so Stella has been remarkable in terms of getting to know the enrollment management side more, because she's been our registrar, she's been involved in advising, she knows all the players. So again, it was about the personnel shift and having someone who's familiar with our system and our people. That makes a big difference. Stella didn't comment on it explicitly, but Stella, please backfill because I'm going to venture into your territory. When you asked about how we're doing, our target for new freshmen this year, new students this fall, first-time students, is 1,375. That is our target. And we have how many acceptances out? Just over 8,000?
9,000.
We have 9,000.
100 on a week.
Okay, so we've already brought on board how many?
About 1,200 deposits for the first.
So when we say we're behind, I want people to be clear and hear it in context. Our target was 1,375. We have 1,200 deposits. We have 9,000 acceptances, 300 on wait lists. So the distance is not.
Have you heard about the airlines when they overbook?
Right. But we know from our historic data that you have to over accept to hit your goal. So the number of 9,000 is based on years of understanding what our typical yield is on a pool. So that was about the right number. We don't usually keep a waiting list, but we are doing it this year knowing that we still want to get to that 1,375. And last year, actually it was 2 years ago, when the rules were shifted about what happens after May 1st. Usually May 1st was the date that when deposits dropped for the students, other schools stopped trying to pull those students in. The feds thought that was unfair, so they changed the rules. So right now, all bets are off for every institution because now there's a lot of poaching going on. Because now every school is looking at their numbers and saying, oh, I've got an extra $5,000 here. I'm going to call that person up and make a new deal with that person who we want to draw. And so the summer melt activities, this actually is a gear up time for the people in enrollment management because they have to work that much harder to betrust any kind of attempt to reduce our yield. And we have to stay on top of who our students are, keep them connected over the summer, keep their families enthused. So the work really continues, but you can see that we're really not far off of the targeted number, but we have to not only get the target number, but protect the summer melt. So I just wanted to put a little more context into it.
Yeah, and also recognize this challenge last September. And we started at that point to put in a new onboarding system where recognize that summer melt was going to continue to be a huge problem, much bigger than years past. So the onboarding program was put in place. It was a cross-campus effort involved a huge cross-section of faculty, staff, to talk about how we're organized to accept students, provide them with the information, time to address some of the confusion that happens when you first deposit. What happens next? When do I register? If you're nodding your head because you know how challenging it can sometimes be to navigate the multiple systems that we have for students. So we launched a new onboarding program. We are providing students information in a timely way. We're giving them feedback on their progress through that system. And we're modernizing some of the orientation efforts. So when they come to campus, what is that experience that they're receiving? And when they are with their orientation program, we recognize that other schools are going to need to go after them throughout the summer into the first weeks of the semester. So we continue to keep them engaged. There's another effort for our welcome week to get them acclimated to the college life. And we're even talking about continuing programming through the first year. So it's not just simply about getting the applications. Applications have never been our problem. This year we received 16,000 applications. They know that SUNY had a free application week that brought us 4,000 more applications than what we normally receive. So we are from that yields in, well, we accepted 9,000, but our yields, I noticed your face about our yield. Yeah, 1,200 is not surprising to us, but we'd like to be higher and account for that summer melt that will happen.
A lot of moving parts and full court press all the time. So you really call it melting in the summer and you, and
That's right.
I kind of understand poaching, but I wasn't familiar with melting.
Yeah.
They melt away the deals. I kind of get that, and it's competitive. Finances are rough all around, money's tight, but they'll mention it. And so we have Erica working, that war chest.
Let me just say on that war chest piece, yes, please keep the war chest built up. I do want to say, however, what we have also seen in our data is that when students don't select us, they're typically going to the research centers in the SUNY system. So our competitors are not the other comprehensives. We're competing against Binghamton, Stony Brook, Buffalo, and Albany. And that's actually a real indicator of the strength of this institution, the programs we offer, and the quality and caliber of the students. Our task, I think, ahead of us is to figure out how, when we get on average 16,000 applicants a year, how can we better position ourselves to bring the yield up to the number? I mean, and we should be aspirant and start to stretch each cycle. I don't want to cause headaches for student affairs side of the house, but we have to house people and provide services. But that's something we really want to start looking into, because if that's our competitor tier, we need to recognize that and realize we're entering a new ball game in terms of how we can present ourselves to an out-facing world. And so the war chest important, but the students we're losing are actually going equivalency in terms of what they're paying. We're not really losing them to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, though there are some that probably apply. We're losing them to other SUNYs in a tier above us. So it's a strategy move, and we're going to pay very close attention to it. As Stella mentioned, and closely aligned, VP Blaisdell and her team, along with enrollment management, are working triply hard to revision, restyle, re-engage that whole welcoming week and orientation activity. So I applaud both Stephanie and Stella for working collaboratively. Another benefit of having somebody who already knew our system come in as VP, because then they're not learning the players and the mechanisms. And at a critical time of enrollment, it was essential for me to have someone in place who we didn't have to train up to be able to hit the ground running. So we're very fortunate that this dynamic duo team is doing that level of work. Stella mentioned EOP. We received notice from, actually I got a phone call or an email or both from SUNY about a month ago. Now it was asking us if we could receive more EOP students because other institutions in the system are not hitting their numbers. Again, a signal that we are a destination of choice for many students. And equally important is that SUNY Central is monitoring and recognizing that we deliver on the promise. And that is an important indicator for me, especially with a new chancellor, that this is a moment in time for us not to be shy about the strength of this institution. And that to me is a very promising sign as we look at changes in demographics and a shrinking of the total applicant pool and an increase in the competitiveness that will occur, especially when we're competing against the research institutions. So, and it's not necessarily a bleak picture, but it's one that we're going to have to get comfortable with and figure out the right strategy to get us to where we want to be. Thank you, Eli, you spoke eloquently to all of the inaugural events. I just heard from someone in the reception for Provost Lyman, what I consider to be, for me, the penultimate compliment. And it went something like this. This individual faculty member thanked me and said, I was among those who had been talking, and there was skepticism about the inauguration because of all of its pomp and circumstance. And I've been saying all along that inauguration is not about me. It's about the institution. And the comment I received back is that to a person in that person's network, the skeptics walked out of inauguration week saying, I feel like I'm in a community. And that's what this was about. It was about anchoring the strength of our academic resources, about our community partnerships, and in between the investiture of the president, but even that was about celebration of the community. And darn it, if that's how people walked out of that feeling, then it was a winner on every mark. And Brianna can speak to it in her comments, but it was equally important for the students to be connected in that regard. So I thank everybody who touched it. The Chancellor Awards are out. You should have gotten the email yesterday identifying them. We had 2 people who were not listed. They are now listed in a supplemental. But we've got our 16th Distinguished Service Professor, I think it is, Professor Chesky, Kasky, number 16 for SUNY New Paltz. It's a high honor. It's the highest that SUNY bestows. So we're very excited to have that, to have him recognized. Those awards and medallions are actually given out in the fall at one of the first meetings. So that was a pleasure to make those phone calls last week. As you've noted, commencement is coming up and we've got our own alumni coming on board. You know, Bob Kinsel is coming to speak and he'll be our speaker on Sunday. And then we have the Honorable, please, my notes, Kevin Bryant speaking on Saturday. So we're all full steam ahead for commencement. What else do I want to?
Eleanor, you wanted to say something?
Yes.
Question. What would it take for SUNY Paltz to become a research center just like those others?
That would be, that is a question that has been in my head. It would take a bit of a lift, but what wouldn't be a lift is to intensify our status within the comprehensives to strengthen even more and then make the decision, do you really want to go to a research institution status? Because by research, you have to have a certain amount of expenditure on research, meaning that we'd have to build up our portfolio to maybe even divert from some of our teaching focus. And I'm not sure we want to do that. So we want to strike the right balance between scholarly activity and not necessarily going into a space. So it's a fine line, and I think it's a community-wide discussion, but I do think we can continue to rattle the cage about what it means to be a comprehensive university and to really demonstrate that we can chew gum and walk at the same time, that we can be strong scholars and producers of creative activity and phenomenal teachers and great community partners. That to me is the signature. And if we get that right, we'll be a model for the nation on how to do that at this level. And it will attract students and faculty, as well as resources, which I'm not at full liberty to talk about at this meeting, but stay tuned for notices in the month. We're getting noticed by people who are going to be making financial contributions to us because of just that. So I hope that answers your question. It's an area to explore and leads me into my final section that highlights 5 things that are coming up in the new year. And these are consistent with strengthening the position of this university. The first, and you've heard me say since my arrival, invest in the people. Make sure that we are doing things that help our faculty and staff to be at the top of their game. We have faculty members on our campus who have been here 30 years and have gone to 1 or 0 professional development in 30 years. 1 or 0. That is not acceptable if you're trying to have a first-class, first-rate team, no matter what profession you're in. Professional development should be part of it. So we are going to do that. And one of our own alums, Stuart Friedman, who is seen as an international scholar in higher ed or in organizational leadership and development, is going to come back and offer at no cost a training that he would normally do for corporate. And he's going to do that for us on the 6th of September. We'll invite between 100 and 150 of our academic leaders and our staff leaders. So we're going to go with the deans, the president's cabinet, the department chairs, leaders of many of the administrative units, because I want them to hear what it means to be an organizational leader. And Stuart's unique slant on this is a combination of life and business learning, and that's what he's known for, integrating the ability to be a whole leader type. And I was thinking today, and we must try to find a way to get some of our student leaders into that training as well. Your schedules will have to be monitored for us to do that. So that's one activity that we're bringing to the campus. We're going to start a new strategic planning process. We had our last strategic plan, which I believe ended in 2018. I think is about the year that was it 2018 or 2021. But it's ended, and we want to put a bow on it and close the books on that one and do a grand presentation on what that strategic plan produced, where it leads us to now, and then immediately start into a strategic planning process. And there is a group that is based, they're actually colleagues of mine that I worked with when I was at Albany, And it's called the Renaissance Center, and they're an interdisciplinary thinking and knowledge organization. They're going to do something called the Concert of Ideas that SUNY has interest in, and we're going to be the beta test site where SUNY bring 8 or 9 other campuses here in terms of some of their leadership. But because it'll be based here, we get to have at least 100 of our own community members participate in this ideation session that launches thinking about strategic initiatives. So that will also occur this fall. And then the goal is to immediately roll into the strategic plan that would be the 24 to 29 strategic plan. Along with that, item number 3, we have the Middle States Reaccreditation mid-cycle review coming up in 2025 already, the mid-cycle review. So you remember from reaccreditation, it's never too early to start planning for it. So we're going to start planning along with our strategic plan, our reaccreditation life cycle with the knowledge that in 2028, we have to do another self-study. And so now is the time to think about it. And I just chaired a site visit for another institution, and they did something similar. Their strategic plan came immediately before their middle state self-study, and they were able to roll the material from the strategic plan right into the self-study. And it was one of the signatures and really important components that strengthen their entire experience. So we have middle state, strategic planning, faculty development, and then, oh yes, in 2028, this institution is 200 years old. So we have a 200th anniversary coming up in the year 2028. And you know, that should not be lost in the mix of things. So that'll be our next big party. You know, how do we do that? How do we celebrate and do justice to turning 200 years old? And then at the same time, Erica and her team are in the phase of preparing the comprehensive campaign. So looking at our fiscal solvency, looking at the future, and some of you may have already been identified in terms of meeting with the team that's leading the development of our case. So we have comprehensive campaign, 200th anniversary, middle states, strategic planning, and faculty development. Those are my next 6 to 7 year agenda items. But I believe very firmly that they're so interrelated, and getting those done will only strengthen us as an institution because they're all aimed at strengthening our ability to deliver a high quality academic process. And I keep pointing to Neil, and because we were at Town Gown this morning, and to continue to strengthen our partnership with our community. And then finally, because Rennie's at the table and I made a note to myself to say it, I think a lot of the experience that I had this year and what I like to think are wins and successes, I think are also attributed to the strong relationship that you and I have held in terms of having our regular meetings and talking through and demonstrating the collaborative nature of what we do. And looking at Brianna, we tried to model the same thing with the students in the SA-RHSA. That's my report. I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions?
Yes.
I want to understand better the EOP dynamic. It sounds like our trend line is crossing trend lines from other institutions. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So I can only monitor other institutions' data when data are made public. But I can say where we said we're having 1,200 students, period, we have shown, we see data where, for example, one institution missed their enrollment mark by 50% last year. 50%.
SUNY institution.
A SUNY institution.
Oh,
We know that other institutions within the constellation of SUNYs, and I'm talking comprehensives, and I could tell by the way you winched, you can imagine the implications of that. And then when you look at the EOP category, some of the comprehensives are not even attracting the base number. And so SUNY is looking and saying, what institution, if they're not even applying to these other institutions, but we don't want to lose those students outside of SUNY, where can we redirect them and who's going to be able to meet the need? And we've demonstrated our ability. So Antonio Benella and his team have done this for years. And again, I point to Brianna, who is a proud EOP and the recipient of the Chancellor's EOP Award this year. So they know that we know what we're doing on this campus. And so they call us up and say, well, can you take another 100 or another 75? And they did that last fall after enrollment period too, because some schools couldn't accommodate those students. And I'm talking to people who know EOP from day one. So yes, we're demonstrating strength on a number of areas. Do we have challenges? Heck yeah, we got challenges ahead of us on all the fronts you imagine. Enrollment, quality of education, financial stability and engagement, you name it. But we have the basic elements. It is about harnessing the power of those strategically to make sure that we're laser focused on a goal of stabilizing in all of those areas.
Add on to that, we actually passed our original goal today. We were shooting for an incoming class of 150. We are officially at 151. That was the first goal. So now we've moved the goalpost, but we also worked really hard to get there. So Tony and his team worked really closely with admissions and other enrollment management folks to get on the phone. We have a network of graduate or guidance counselors, particularly in the 5 boroughs. And we have the highest graduation rates of any comprehensive for EOP students, and we beat UAlbany, who has a lot more resources than we do. So it's a proud claim to fame.
Let me just offer a anecdote to that. I'm in the second class of EOP that came to New Paltz. By the time we got to our 5th year, SUNY was so impressed with everything that was going on here, they asked SUNY New Paltz to accept 500 EOP students. So there's a tradition of SUNY looking to New Paltz to make, because they know that EOP can work here. I won't say make it work. They know that it can work here. That the students do come here, they do graduate, and they graduate basically on time. Not a lot of lag time, because just the way in which they motivate the students to want to participate and to be graduate. In a lot of cases, they are the first ones in their family going to schools, or in some cases, they're the second ones, and they've come here as a private institution. So congratulations to you, and I hope that you continue the success. And just as an aside, the award that Brianna won is called the Norman McConney Award. Norman McConney worked for Arthur Eves, who was an assemblyman from Buffalo. He ran for mayor, and he was the deputy speaker. Norman McConney was working for Arthur Eves when I was working for Carey. So I've known Norman, and I know his dedication to EOP. And if he was still alive and met Brianna, he would be so happy to know.
I'm proud of you, Brianna. You're so deserving. And I kind of knew where EOP students did here, and they do really, really well. And it's momentum, and it's a magnet also. And it's a magnet because of the success people like Brianne. And you're a great example to everybody, not only your peers, but the ones that are yet to come here. They're going to be coming here next year. Okay. So thank you, and congratulations. It's well deserved.
Thank you.
Well, you got to hit the ground running. I know you're just easing into this.
I got this big screen TV in the lounge
Yeah,
chair next door.
wow,
That's all.
wow. And it isn't just the idle thoughts. So, real vision and real agenda and real focus. And so thank you. And I know the inauguration in the community, and it's always a team. And should I say this political thing? It's like, not me, but I ran into Chris Christie. You know who he is?
Yeah.
It was like a whatever. And it was before the playoff games that the New York Giants. It was with somebody, and he was there just going through. Oh, hi, and I of course easily recognized. So I had a little conversation with him, and so what I said was that leadership. How important is leadership? Well, the New York Football Giants the year before had like terrible record. They got a new coach. Only thing different, if anything, the talent was worse this year than it was the year before, and they did really, really, really well. The only thing that was different, coach. And so leadership really, 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 really matters. And you lead by example, but you just have it, and you either have it or you don't as a leader. So people think they check the box and they're a leader, but it's not like that. It's within you. But the results are really there from leadership. It's somewhat an intangible quality, but it really, really, really means a lot. But the point is that what the leader did in terms of the football Giants was first game of the year, they were behind by 1 point right at the end, and it could have been just kick the field goal and go into overtime. But no, he went for the 2-point conversion, the coach, and he showed confidence in his team by doing that. It showed, now if they didn't succeed, it would still have shown the team that he was confident in their ability, that he stood with them. And they did score the 2-point and win the game. So it's a two-way street, leadership. You show your respect and your understanding and your support for your team, but then the team supports you. So it's that whole situation, and you hit the ground running. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, I don't know if that's apropos, but I think it is.
That was very good.
Thank you very
And
much.
thank you for being our leader. So let's see.
How have I?
So now, Steph, we have something, these things, the students, we're modernizing the handbook. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I say, I'm trying to think where it was where we spoke about, social justice. So it was at my temple last week about the cover portion was about, the eye for an eye, but it doesn't mean go, kill somebody. Doesn't mean really take an eye. Okay. So this has it reflects some of that social justice. Correct?
Right.
So why don't you give us a little introduction about the proposed significant changes?
And we don't print very many of these, but we are obligated to print a couple in case people need them. And I brought them just to show you sort of the context of the handbook. So it is a pretty hefty document. It contains the code of conduct, but also contains things like an addendum on Title IX, our visional mission and some other sort of guidance on processes and things. But the code of conduct comes before the College Council for approval when we have substantial changes. There are things that we can't change in the code of conduct because they're determined by SUNY policy or state law or federal law. So those things often have to go into the handbook verbatim. So we can't do anything about that. And those changes sometimes happen periodically during the year. For example, we are waiting on new guidance on Title IX that we expect to come out any day now. We'll have to very quickly turn that around in time for the fall, but it's nothing that this group will have purview over. And it also doesn't affect the conduct code. It will affect more of that addendum explaining to students the processes. So those things we have to stay pretty flexible for. We have over the years, particularly since I've been here the last 6 years, constantly been reviewing the handbook to tweak it to reflect our institution's community's values. And so we've had a little bit of this flavor of change coming forward before now. The changes that you received all reflect a movement towards that restorative justice approach. So we don't want to be in a situation most of the time to tell a student that they have to leave the community and never come back. We want to set them up for essentially a timeout. You have a reason to be separated from the community for a time. When you re-enter, we want to make sure that you're successful. So most of the changes really are to reflect a greater attention to the idea of social or restorative justice to allow a student to make the correction after a mistake and be successful. So the first change is just moving away from the F-star grades. So typically when a student is suspended or expelled, not only do they lose their tuition and any fees like for housing or sometimes meal plans. But they also have to leave with a grades of F for the entire semester. So we want to get away from that practice and instead give students a W so that if they can come back, we're not tanking their GPA along with everything else from the semester. The second number of changes are really to give us a little bit more flexibility in that initial conference. So when a student comes in, they have a choice to affirm or negate the charges. And if they're negating the charges, typically that goes right into whatever the next process is. So if it's a it's a violation of a regulation that requires a hearing process, that's the end of the initial conference and it goes to that hearing process. These changes would allow the initial conference to be more than that. So if a student says, no, I want to negate that charge, but I want to have you be the decider and I want to tell you why I'm negating the charge. There's flexibility in that process to do that. There's also the ability for the director of the student conduct, like community standards, or their designee, we do have an associate director, to decide to rescind the charges if mediation is appropriate. So there's just a little bit more flexibility within those letters under number 2. Number 3 is removing some language, again, that allows us to, in the cases of a suspension, when they come back, we don't want to specify that, if you do anything at this point, you're going to get suspended again. We want them to be able to re-enter and have an appropriate process to re-enter the community. The Good Samaritan rule is if a student reports that some violation has occurred, but it's led to a health emergency, we always respond without any consequence to the person reporting. We do want to amend that slightly to say that in the case where it really benefits the student, we want to be able to require that they take a brief educational program. So that's an amendment to the Good Samaritan situation. And then updating our sexual assault misconduct wording to be consistent with current legal guidance. It's really differentiating between how we use the word bullying, because bullying against a specific protected class is identified as harassment. So it's just changing the words to be consistent with that. Number 6 is kind of the catch-all for all the minor stuff that I'm not going to walk you through because it's all the language clarification. We are changing everything from college to university. We're updating all of our titles. And Neil had asked a question about pronouns. In every instance that we can change specific wording, we are using the student, getting away from he, she, they, and all other pronouns, just saying the student. So that's it in sum.
Okay.
How often do you have these problems?
Which problem?
The ones that you outlined.
Yeah. We have a pretty busy conduct office. So we are constantly sort of trying to mediate and manage situations. Sometimes they rise to the level of actual charges. Sometimes it's things that we can cut off at the pass by working with students to manage conflict. So it's a busy office. When I arrived, we had a dean of students who had a number of responsibilities, one of which was almost all of the conduct. Now we have, we're in the process of searching for the decision right now, but we have an assistant vice president and dean of students who's involved in conduct, a director of student conduct and community standards, and an associate director of conduct and community standards.
Does that mean there are more problems now than there used to be?
There are. Students have really missed out on so many opportunities to socialize and sharpen their skills, their interrelational skills through COVID. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on with the way conflict plays out, particularly in dense populated living situations. So we have students who are in triples, we have students who are in doubles, we have students who are in suites of up to 8 people. That's a lot of relationships to manage. And so it's not unusual for that to lead to problems that usually we want to handle through mediation and other early intervention strategies, but occasionally to lead to conduct charges.
It's sad to hear about that. I wish it weren't true.
I wish it weren't true either, but I'm really happy that we have the structure between our trained resident assistants and our resident directors and our community mentors and other folks that are in place to help them practice. Because we do really want them to make sure that these skills are ready when they're graduating into the world. So we would rather have to manage the conflict here than not have them have that opportunity.
Julie's got a question too.
Oh, Julie has a question? Or I have a question?
Julie's here first.
Okay, thanks. So, two things. One is under number 4, it was stated that a student must is going to be mandatory that they're referred to a brief educational program, but what was circulated says may.
It's not always the case that they would be referred to a brief educational program, but if they are, so if they may be referred to an educational program if the circumstances warrant it, and if they are referred to a brief educational program, then completing that program is mandatory.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification on that.
Yes.
The other question I had was, I don't know what W means in a grade.
The withdrawal.
Oh, withdrawal. Okay, great. That's all my questions. Thanks.
When you talk about the re-entry, I'm sorry, am I?
Well, no, but.
You're supposed to-
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
But
sorry.
I saw your hand up.
My question.
Yep.
I have a similar question, but before I ask the question, I wanted about the conduct and all the cases of conduct. I feel like having been a student here in the 70s and an administrator in the 80s, I feel like there may be an uptick in conduct issues, but I also feel that we call more attention to it because we're paying more attention. So I feel that it's not like we have so many more conduct issues and so many more behavioral problems. It's that we're really addressing it and kind of getting in the students' faces a little bit more than we did when I was a student. There's a lot of things that we did nobody paid any attention to and that we got away with, and conflicts that we had in the dorms that we just either solved ourselves or escalated off campus.
It is definitely a different world. The other difference is that you weren't posting it on social media.
Exactly. That is a big thing.
We have something called Yik Yak,
Yes.
which is the bane of our existence. It is an anonymous posting opportunity that really calls out
It's cyberbullying.
exactly. It's an unfortunate platform that we wish we constantly are talking about banning the yak. And actually, one of our new staff had this brilliant idea that I think we're going to try out next year. Nothing kills social media faster than old people getting on it,
Read that.
right? So I would invite all of my college council colleagues, let's all get on Yik Yak and post really boring things, and the students will flee, and it will be the end of our problem. Right?
Yeah.
About the brief educational. Can you
Okay.
define brief education?
Sure, like we have a coordinator of wellness initiatives who offers a program that is specifically designed for when there are alcohol or drug abuse issues. So it might be going through the STEP program that she facilitates. That's usually, our Good Samaritan policies are almost always associated with some sort of alcohol or drug violation. So that's, if we see someone who has had a pretty serious alcohol violation and we feel that they would really benefit from some sort of intervention, this would allow us to prescribe that you need to do that before you're allowed to move on.
Ron, you have something?
You talked about re-entry, and it sounded like you said re-entry without stipulation. Now, my question is, I think I understand why you're doing it. But what I don't see or what I don't hear is what's being done behind the scenes to hold the student accountable to make sure that they've learned something, as opposed to just saying you can come back and get a chance to do it again.
So that's a really great point. And I don't mean to overstate what's under number 3 here. So it is still being replaced with, you would return for 1 year, under 1 year of disciplinary probation. So that is sort of our first level of warning. So they're not coming back completely free, but it eliminates some of the wording of no judicial hearing, no.
Okay,
this, no
all right,
that.
okay, all right.
But your point is really well taken, because we do want to move into having more things prescribed if we do separate someone from our community, to ensure that they come back well prepared for reentry. So to President Wheeler's point, I was very fortunate in being able to go to my first national conference since I've been at SUNY Paltz, because it was in the region, and I was able to split the hotel bill with somebody else who was attending the conference. But one of the sessions that I heard was MIT's approach to suspensions, and it's suspending with heart. And what they do, and the massive amounts of resources that they have to help people reintegrate, is a lot of prescriptive things that are outside. While during that time of suspension, they have to do some sort of meaningful project. They have to, which could be community service, could be working, could be something, but they can't just go away and sit for a year. So meaningful project, they have to write an essay essentially when they come back in, and they have to come back into a support group. But anybody who took a leave, either through disciplinary or maybe a medical leave, any type of leave, they come back in a support group for a period of time. I really love those ideas. I'd like to work towards that, but we want to do more.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, in that space.
Sure. Abe?
This actually kind of piggybacks on what Ronald was saying. You mentioned that these are in the spirit of restorative justice, and something that I've experienced working with the county is we have a restorative justice center, but a lot of our programming really is not. We still have a lot of work to do to really fulfill that promise. And one of the concerns that I have in hearing these which I agree with all of them, I'm not hearing a lot about righting the harm that the victim, if it is an instance with a victim, how we restore their justice, right? Because that's a big part of the restorative justice program. And also, community service, I think is very good, and it demonstrates a commitment and a desire to be back at the institution. But I don't know, depending on what it is, that it really it really helps the expelled student or the suspended student really understand the impact of their specific actions. And it sounds like it helps protect the institution, but I really want to know how we're protecting victims and how the victim component of the restorative justice philosophy is, or maybe in a future update could be incorporated.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot there to talk about. So, and I would welcome a conversation too. It sounds like we have a lot to share in common, then I would welcome that conversation.
Anything else? So seems to me analogous to removing mandatory sentencing, giving discretion to the people who are closest to the problem and the administrators who are charged with the responsibility to give them the flexibility to do things better. And Abe, like you say, some of those things occur right at the mediation or initial phase rather than the ball rolling with the adversarial proceeding. Sometimes untoward results occur that are unfair to both parties. The situation sometimes it compounds those things to the victim, it helps the victim. So to me, it seems like the policies are in keeping with what is rational and reasonable, and what is now is not. And, but everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's the way it looks to me. And there's a lot of thought gone into this, and I think it reflects what the reality is. And I think it's a different world than I grew up in. Certainly, COVID, social media has presented many, many more problems that were unanticipated 20 years ago. Unthought of, unheard of. And now we have to deal with them. With some procedures and tools to begin dealing with them in a better way. But one doesn't know until one tries. Then if it doesn't work, what you do is fix it. So, yeah,
I just wanted to just mention, just hearing you describe that, I think that the way that I've tried to approach some of these in the, areas in which I'm a leader are, have helped me understand that I know that there's a reaction to how new a lot of these things feel. From a lot of conversations I've had, a lot of these things are not new. And I know that this was mentioned earlier, but a lot has changed, but a lot is the same more than it ever has been. And I think that that's like, when I think about when I was a student here, there was a situation, I'll use as an example, we found a cell phone on the quad that had photos on it. We were trying to figure out whose cell phone it was. We looked at the photos and it was clear from the photos that this person had taken photos against someone's will. And we decided to destroy the cell phone and use that as our kind of silent, we're just going to throw this cell phone, we're going to break it in half, throw it in the trash. I would handle that completely different today. If you asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have gone to, try and get this person expelled or something. If you asked me today, I would have wanted to make sure that they get some kind of training so they understand what they did. And that behavior doesn't change. That behavior has been going on forever. I mean, that's, I had an issue this week where we had I was listening to a colleague from a different generation explain behavior that I know is not appropriate, as the issue being that the norms changed and the person didn't adapt to the norms correctly. But the reality is the behavior was never okay. And I just want to make sure that that's clear. And that is not something that has changed.
Well, do you think language changes it? I think the people who administer it are the ones who are closest to it. And I think this gives them the flexibility to know what the revenues would be on a case by case basis. But that's why these proposals are being made. Say that that's somewhat general, but I think it offers better alternative than the present.
Yeah, I don't mean to disagree. I agree with
whether
all
it's the alternative.
I'm just
answer or not.
I'm commenting on the conversation.
We'll find out, but I get it totally. People are people, and some things are extenuated. Some things were never right. We'll kind of get that, but it's a new world, and there's a few more tools. But it was the death penalty option always when I went to school.
Yeah.
Just F gone. And was that the right way? I think that these proposals reflect a better way. And maybe it isn't, but I think it's certainly worth a try. So thank you for your.
Do we need to vote on this?
Yes, that's what I'm waiting for, a motion, but I'm the chair. I can't make a
Make a
motion.
motion to approve the proposed changes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Now, it's not my favorite thing, but now we hear about money. I always have the same thing, just raise more. How are we doing?
All right, hang on one sec. Julie, are you seeing the screen? Good, thank you. Okay. Good day. All right, so you might have heard that Governor Hochul released the enacted budget last week. And for the first time in about 20 years, it has some substantial language for increases for SUNY. Of course, that makes us very happy, but we don't know how happy just yet. So the biggest item in the budget for SUNY is $163 million in direct taxpayer support over last year's amount, with what I call the pinky promise to sort of a commitment to extend another 2 years of $54 million per year for SUNY in direct taxpayer support. $1.6 billion in capital support, which is sort of in line what we got last year, but it's just in different buckets. So this year it's $100 million in flexible dollars, and that just means that it's not critical maintenance. It could go for new square footage. $200 million in research related activities for Albany and Stony Brook,
370 million in digital transformations. Now we don't, and other projects. So we don't know exactly how much is going to go in the digital transformation bucket or how much is in the other bucket. But these are for things we're hearing like SUNY large platforms. So learning management system, or my folks work in the financial management systems. HR works on an HR platform. And a lot of those things need a big overhaul. Also, SUNY Online could get some love from this money. So we're waiting to see how that all pans out. And then another $650 million in critical maintenance. Last year, we got 550 as a university, and this year it's 650. So they upped that by $100 million.
SUNY-wide.
SUNY-wide. Yes. There's also 75 million in one-time transformational initiative funds for workforce alignment, student completion, student efforts to increase enrollment. Actually, President Wheeler heard a bit more about this than I did on my call yesterday, but it sounds like campuses will be able to compete for the lion's share, well, not the lion's share, but compete for a good share of this funding. And the particulars, the criteria for all of this is being worked out. It'll probably take several months before we know exactly what the criteria are. But my boss has us all primed at the pump to start thinking about things that fall into these broad categories, so that we'll be ready to submit our requests as soon as they come out, put us in a good position to get some of that money. And then $1.5 billion state matched endowment fund to bolster research at the university centers. So the state will do $500 million, and $1 billion would be privately raised. Also not in the non-number category is increased flexibility for non-resident tuition. Previously, tuition is still always approved by the Board of Trustees. It looks like we're going to keep in-state, so resident tuition flat at the undergraduate level. But right now there's a working group, a tuition rate working group that is working with SUNY to see how much each campus would dare to go up in the non-resident categories of undergrad and graduate. So we're still working through that to see what raising tuition might look like as far as dollars go, but also what's the impact on our potential enrollment. So it's a very tricky scale for all of us. There are also TAP benefits were increased to include workforce-focused micro-credentials. They expanded part-time TAP to our colleges of technology. And great news for our student workers and other workers that may be at the minimum wage. The minimum wage is increasing. On our campus, we don't know exactly what all of these buckets are going to be. It generally takes a couple of Board of Trustee meetings, and then a lot of meetings between SUNY and the presidents to really parse out the dollars. We are hoping for a direct taxpayer support number in and around June of this year, because obviously we have to get our budgets out before July 1st. So we're anxiously awaiting some decisions at the SUNY level. Questions on that before I move on? All right, so I'm gonna move our friend Julie. Don't worry, Julie, I'm just taking you for a ride. Okay, there we go. Oops. There, we'll put her over here. Okay, so this is our standard reports, where we were on April 30th of 23 compared to April 30th of 22. On April 30th, we are 10 months out of 12 through the year, or 83% completed. As I believe I shared last meeting, but wasn't quite sure because we still had a few things to shuffle out in our revenue. We've overachieved. We've exceeded our revenue target for the year by about 3% overall, which is fantastic. We haven't received all of the state support yet, but there's no reason to think that it's not coming. It's just, they typically give us the last of the state support in June, so that number will be finalized very soon. Last year at this point, we had not achieved our tuition target, and actually you can see that the target itself was a little lower. So this year we collected $47 million, and last year it was $45 million. So that's an encouraging trend, one that, as Stella said before, we're trying to keep going, keep that number rising. And just for comparison's sake, the state support last year at this time was only 40% of what they owed us, and this year it's 62. So things are looking pretty healthy on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, we're pretty much in line with what we were last year. We're still seeing a marked reduction in the number of staff that we have on campus. Last time we actually counted them up, we had 106 vacant positions out of about 1,100, so a 10%. 10% of our workforce positions, our budgeted positions, are vacant right now. So people are looking a little haggard around campus. You'll know why, but we're still fighting a good fight. So our personnel service is personal service is only at 78%, even though we're 83% here. Temporary services at 81%, so they're right in line with where we normally are. Utilities, unfortunately, you all know this at home, they're up and pretty substantially. We will exceed that number, I'm guessing, by a bit, and I'll show you those numbers in a minute. And then supplies, travel, contracts, and equipment, right in line exactly where we were last year, so no surprises there. Come on. Sometimes this thing's a little slow. Go forward. Yeah, I gotta click here. There we go. All right, so this is the same spreadsheet basically, but the AVP for budget, Julie Walsh, and myself looked at the estimated expense remaining for all of these different buckets. So again, we had 2 months of 12 months left to go here. Personal service is pretty easy to calculate, especially since it's on the system. So we just stole that number. Temporary service, we estimate by the number of payrolls that were left. Utilities, it's not quite a wild guess, but it's a pretty educated guess that, again, we're gonna probably blow through our utilities budget by about $800,000 this year. A lot of that is the water the water bill that we pay to the village of New Paltz is substantially higher than we expected last year. So we're diving into that, those details right now. Supplies, contracts, travel, and equipment. At this point in the year, it's still almost free for all. If people have money in their budgets, they're busy looking to spend it. But procurement just put out a message to the campus telling them, hey, this is your last day to put in a request that equals X dollars or more. So we should see that number not quite go up to the 4.1 or $4.2 million that we budgeted. So all in all, if you look at the far right at the bottom, from a $10.5 million deficit to begin the year in the budgeted deficit, we anticipate being somewhere around $6.5 million to $7 million at the end of the year. One large caveat here is that the United University Professions, UUP union, has not yet settled its contract. When they do, it will be retroactive to July 1st. We don't anticipate it hitting this year because the contract's not settled yet, but we do know that we have to keep the monies in reserve for that. So.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Yes, question.
I just wonder why it's difficult to get employees. Why? People don't need work.
Yeah.
Well,
it's-
there's a great resignation. You know, people are burned out, they're moving off to different jobs. You know, we've had almost 100% turnover in different departments in the town.
Really?
Obviously, the same thing.
Well, and I'll just add to that because we see it at the county level and, you know, even in my private sector work, there is a significant increase to the cost of living in this community. Like while the residence halls have a cost of living that folks in this room can have some say over, what happens out there is going up significantly. And that is putting upward pressure on wages in order to make up that difference. And that is something that is particularly, this is a nationwide problem, but it's particularly acute here. And so I'm not surprised that the combination of significantly increased cost of living and the slower reaction that public sector wages can have, because in the public sector, you can't make the decisions as quickly in the private sector to retain an employee that's on their way out the door because they just got a rent increase. So I suspect that's what's happening here. It's horrifying, but it doesn't surprise me, frankly.
It's just the way it is. And is it ever going to equalize? Well, who knows? It used to be the stability of public employment outweighed having a better wage for private. But now there's such demand for employees, private sector is there. So it's hard to be competitive.
There's also a number, like there's a few issues also that have changed in the landscape in the last 10 to 15 years. You know, and COVID, I think, accelerated, unfortunately, some of those issues, which is childcare, for example. You know, if you want to have a community that is sustained over multiple generations, you have to have a childcare system that provides for early childcare so that parents can go to work during those same years, invest in their communities, stay in their communities, and then those children go into the school system. We're seeing lower birth rates. We're seeing less childcare facilities. The wages for childcare is very low, so you don't have people who are willing to go into that profession. We have housing shortages. I mean, in addition to just what it would look like to get a rent increase, you know, while you're balancing check to check, you can't find a place to live. You know, building costs are too big or too expensive for some families to build new. Inventory is very low for those people who are selling established neighborhoods. So it's just a perfect storm. And then the pandemic, I think, just put everything into a blender at a time where we weren't prepared to see it all blended up at the same time. And then there's remote work. I mean, you know, depending on who you are as an employer, whether you're public or you're private, your flexibility to be able to give remote types of employment are really making a difference. There is, you know, people have now seen work-life balance as like a thing that they need, not just a thing that they aspire to. And so for some people, that's factoring more than their salary. So it's not even, let me give you $5,000 more to come. People want to work from a porch in Maine for the state of New York, right? And there's complications to things like that.
So it's going to get better tomorrow, though, right?
Yeah, we have all the answers by the time we're done for here.
Know what all the problems are. The solutions are not so easy. And I don't like being older, but I just know things take longer than you think, or more complicated than they appear. You usually go wrong. But what you do is you persevere, and eventually that pendulum comes swinging back. But when and how, who knows? And it's not easy. It's not easy. If there was a quick solution, it would already be here. So we're in that. We have the number jugglers. You know, we're doing very well. Yeah. It's not.
Magic we can pull out of that.
But it's not easy. And then the other side is when you say taxpayer support, that means taxes, right? So then so that's a headwind as well. And so, you know, the confluence is always there. It will get better. When and how, I can't tell you, but perseverance will be rewarded. And so thank you for balancing as best you can.
We're not balanced.
No, but
So-
we're allocating well.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy. And maybe by putting we had the chair board of trustees here for the party. And so she certainly observed how well New Paltz does and how desirable it is to come here. And hopefully that will generate support. And one doesn't know, but I would say that by putting us in the best light can't hurt. And so hopefully good deeds here get rewarded to some degree. That's, on that note, I don't have much more to say. Does anybody have any new business or anything, or old business? Are you all done yet?
Just a slide. It's just a pretty picture. And just to, visually show how we're doing. As you know, tuition is the bulk of our operating revenue. And right now it represents 63.04% of our spending need. State support is 22.08. Our unmet need is about 14.5. And there's a very tiny little sliver at the top that's interest and fees. Actually, good news is interest is growing a little bit this year. So when we move forward to next year's budget, what we're hoping to do is Stella and her team recruiting and retaining new students. So she's my right. She gets
Graduates.
yeah. So we hope to increase the green part of the pie. And we also are really banking on a significant increase in the purple part of the pie. And then shrinking that unmet need down to a more reasonable number to give us time to completely get the budget into balance.
I just want to say on the blue piece, the unmet need, this
Yeah.
goes with the component we were discussing, and maybe even Eleanor taps into being in a different tier in the future. Our plan forward, the plan that I'm pushing, builds on the need to identify non-tuition based revenue. That the solution is not just in growing more students, because at some point you hit a cap as to how many students you can get on board unless you go digital remote, but you still have expenses associated with that teaching, residence hall, staffing. We've got to grow the blue part of the pie as well. And so my question, I'll work with Michelle on this and we can look at it later. Does the unmet need equal, or is it greater or less than the actual deficit on an annualized basis, to give us an idea of what shrinking that gap would actually look like in terms of our bottom line, and what percentage of an unmet need would allow us to get to a balanced budget and then start to retool around our ability to achieve that goal. So I think, Michelle's diagram is illustrative of what we need to do, but it must include dealing with non-tuition based revenues, whether that's through scholarship, research, intellectual property, new ventures that, we've been talking particularly with Stella and team about new ways of looking at providing services that families could pay for as part of the tuition above and beyond what we offer as a robust set of things. And Tahina keeps us mindful of always covering what we must legally. But I've been in institutions where families will pay more than tuition to have those additional services available to students. So there are ways in which we really want to start to look at this.
Michelle, could you just give us a brief example of what are some unfulfilled needs that are in the blue part?
So basically, it's just the gap that we have the money to balance the budget. So our income and our expenditures are not aligned. So right now we have reserves that will plow into this fund to make it balanced for the year. But if we run out of reserves, we won't have money to balance. And it basically, when you look back at our expenditure chart, when you look at the expenditure chart, you see that personal service is our largest factor by all means. So it comes down to, we can't stop paying utilities. We don't really, when we talk about supplies and travel and other, it's really, it's not a lot that goes in there: paper, Post-its, pens, and some service contracts. So we really don't have another place to cut besides personnel. And as we said before, we're already down to 90% of our normal workforce, and we're having trouble delivering the services that students need, that they're paying for.
Which just reinforces that we cannot continue as an institution to deficit our way out of this. we have to expand our ability to generate revenues in ways that we haven't before. And we have to look at auxiliary services, utilization of facilities. We have to be able to look at non-traditional ways, and many institutions are doing it, including extramural funding streams. And this speaks to the scholarship that our faculty do. And there are dollars available for programmatic initiatives. We used to have the, what was the program that we lost? Why am I drawing?
Yeah.
Which one?
Trio.
Trio. We used to have Trio that would allow us to cover staffing dollars. And that's a federal grant opportunity, which we had for several years and lost. Those kinds of things help us to fill voids. And we've got, but there's a but there. We don't have right now the internal apparatus because we've depleted staff lines. So we've brought and so we're going to have a period where we must invest to get the people in place to allow us to achieve the goal. And I think everybody, all of you in corporate spaces, you know what that looks like. There is a short period where you have to calculate the time in which you are going to be willing to risk and keep very strong controls in place to know if you're veering too far off on it, but you're going to have to take the hit in order to grow.
You know, that's just, it's called investment.
That's it.
And they're not all winners. So you get criticized when it doesn't work, but if you don't work at all, you're never going to get anywhere.
We'll never get out of this
It's
cycle.
risk, and but this gets rewarded. It's not easy, it's hard. And it's a different game. It's we're, you know, public institution. There's the other side, always productivity, but people work really hard here, especially when there's a 10% deficit in workforce and a lot of headwind and putting out a really wonderful product. You know, it's not cheap to be really good. It's money, resources, not just financial, but in time and commitment. And it's a great team here. And I'm going to try to end on some optimism. We're going to send out those graduates, and they're going to, you know, be calling up Erica. Email is so they can send their donations because they want to be alums and they want to, you know, help the institution to get more of the stardust, because the better New Paltz does in the future, the better their reputations will be enhanced because they'll get some of that stardust falling on them. So anything else? That's it for the budget, right? Raise, and we don't know. I don't think there's going to be like a godsend from, but there is more money, but not much. But more is still better.
Yes.
I heard. There's a
We're better. Yeah.
anything? Okay, yes, Eleanor, sure.
This kind of motion that we.
Okay, I'm going to go 1 second because I want to thank everybody, and I want to say everybody, I mean, the entire room. It's been a great year. I look forward to seeing almost even Brianna, I'll have to see you on campus, but you know, congratulations. I'll see you at graduation, but it's been wonderful to have you here. You have successor groomed, I'm sure. I hope you enjoyed your time here. We have some new members, and so it's good to see new faces and new energy, and that goes from the top on down. We have a great leader, and we're going to say goodbye to Barb.
Eli, thank you as well.
Me, I'm having a good time, you know. Thanks to seeing happy faces. And so thank you very much. So I look forward to seeing everybody at graduation. So we'll get some new dates next year or on the council next year. Who knows, the governor might actually do appointments, you know. I know I got vetted like so long ago. That was before I committed, you know, well. Okay. And so thank you very much. So have a good summer. I'll see you.
Thank you.
Second Illinois numbers.
All in favor? Happy summer.
Oh, yeah.